I'm not going to mince words here. Maxine was a major disappointment, and I want to talk about it in this review because I was extremely excited for this movie. So this was such a huge bummer for me. And this has just kind of been the diminishing returns for this franchise for me because I thought X was really good. I thought Pearl was pretty good, but actually had a great performance with Mia Goth. And now I'm left with Maxine, which is a movie that I fundamentally have a lot of issues with. And it's kind of this issue, it's a joke that I've seen occasionally. Ty West is too talented of a director to be working with a writer in Ty West. And throughout this movie, I kind of just kept thinking that. I had that protruding thought in my mind. And what ended up just happening was I kept thinking, what is this script? What am I supposed to think here? Like, what is Ty West trying to get me to grapple with in this movie? And it's just not a particularly thought-provoking movie, and it's not a particularly fun movie, which is just a huge issue, especially when compared to X and Pearl, which I think are both very fun, have some fun ideas that they're playing with, and even with Pearl has a little bit of more thought-provoking, I guess you could say. And I think when I'm just trying to logically critique this movie and what this movie is trying to be for people is Ty West is balancing just far too many things in Maxine because he's just serving too many masters. This is a movie that is supposed to be a direct sequel to X, a spiritual sequel to Pearl, a direct homage to 80s sleaze cinema. It is a movie about picture making. It is a story about stardom and the lengths of which people are willing to go to achieve fame. It is an examination of Reagan's American society in the 1980s, as well as it is a subversion of modern day horror tropes. That's a lot of things that this movie is supposed to be, and I think things is the key word. It just, none of these things brought me in. And to be honest, none of these components I found particularly well fleshed out. But the even bigger issue is I thought a few of them were done pretty poorly in this movie. And let's just talk about Mia Goth real quick to really start this review. And in Maxine, you can clearly tell, as well as this entire trilogy that Ty West has been creating, Mia Goth is the focal point. She is the muse of Ty West. And I think she's quite good in Pearl. And I think it was really actually got a lot of people even more excited for this idea of a trilogy. Like there was a real fervor and fandom that built up and a legacy, I think, with Mia Goth in that film where it was just like, oh, who actually is this actress? Like there's something so special. And then take that with the makeup effects that they did in the first movie where she can portray the old woman and the Maxine in that film. Like there was just kind of an aura around her. To be fully honest, I kind of found Mia Goth's performance in Maxine to be pretty one note, and I think that's a fundamental flaw of the story in Maxine, which Maxine finally gets her big break in Hollywood. However, a mysterious killer stalks and kills starlets of Los Angeles, and the trail of blood and guts leads right back to Maxine's front door and her sinister past, connecting her with the Texas porn star massacre, which happens in the movie X. And let's just talk about this and this huge issue that I had with the movie right off the bat, because anyone who has watched the trailer knows that the name the Nightstalker is invoked in this movie, and I believe everyone who saw the trailer probably had a similar thought to which I had going into this movie, that this is essentially Ty West doing his version of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but this time it's set in the 1980s involving the Nightstalker and not Charles Manson. And let's just make something clear right off the bat, is this is not what that movie is, which that's totally fine. That is a totally fine approach to go into this movie and to use the Nightstalker almost as subversion. And I don't really care about that. But the issue is the movie uses the Nightstalker as a misdirection, but it becomes so blatantly obvious really early on in the movie that the Nightstalker really doesn't have anything to do with the story or movie, and thus his role is simply to be misdirection, but it's not done in a clever way. In fact, it's just kind of distracting, and it doesn't really tie into anything. And it was just kind of the issue with the story, where it's subversion, but I don't understand what it was trying to entail in those moments. And it just leads to a far more muddled narrative focus than this film needed to have. And that's kind of the issue with this entire movie. It's nothing in particular is done in a clever way in Maxine. Even the technical components of this movie that I liked, they feel replicative, and I enjoy that. However, I don't think there is much else in service except replicating a certain aesthetic. And I do want to just sing Ty West praises real quick, because I do think he is a really clever, technically gifted director, especially of composition and photography. Some of the recreation, whether through music choices, cosmetics, scenery, or jargon, sets the time for this time period really well. And the action is often framed beautifully in Maxine. And everyone in this film gives confident, often incredibly engaging performances. I wanted to shout out a few. Kevin Bacon as a sleazy PI probably walks away with this movie easily. Giancarlo Esposito plays a Hollywood agent. I thought he just had a ton of fun chewing the scenery with this role. I want to see him doing kind of more of these comedic roles with a bit of that sinister nature that he does so well as an actor in them. And Bobby Cannavale is a detective who always had dreams of gracing the big screen. He is also a standout scene stealer in this movie. But the issue with Maxine is kind of that. It's that a lot of these characters, and especially the male characters in this movie, get a lot of the attention, and the film's big moments are given to these characters. And Maxine is thus then kind of forgotten within her own film and this narrative. And to say it bluntly, she feels incidental to this film's story, which I think a lot of people would rightfully say, Ben, but Maxine doesn't really have a role in X, essentially. Like, this is her role. She is kind of accidental/incidental in that movie, and everything kind of happens around her, which I think is a fair counterpoint. I don't want to dismiss that out of hand. However, I think the issue is when you then do when you make this character, I should say, a focal point of a trilogy, and you have Mia Goth at the center of this all, then I think it's also then fair to say, well, isn't this movie about Maxine Minx? And isn't that what this entire trilogy is? Even if we're jumping back in the second one to Pearl, like, it is about Mia Goth and what these characters have in common, which is this desire for fame and to be a star. And with that said, then, I just don't think it's a fair thing to just kind of wave it off and say, well, she's not really the main character, and that's kind of the point. This film is entitled Maxine. I think it is fair to assume that this movie should be about Maxine, and it just really isn't. And this is felt strongest in the third act of this movie, which I truly think is one of the most baffling acts to end a trilogy that I've seen in a long time. I just can't say I understood any of the decisions that Ty West or the story makes in its finale. I don't think the film does a good job at setting anything up, and it's not even a real mystery. It just comes out of left field. Like, it's not even like something that I even thought was on the board, and it didn't feel subversive. It didn't do any of that. I was just kind of left thinking like, oh, that's the decision? That's it? And it just kind of led to this disjointed and honestly what I felt to be a really lazy ending to wrap up this film that I had been eagerly anticipating for quite a while. It was such a weird thing to go from a movie that I thought was really good to then a second movie that I thought was not as good as the first one, but had qualities that I loved of it and really just expanded Ty West as a filmmaker for me and Mia Goth as an actress. And then to go into this third movie and just really be left thinking by the end of this, wait, so what's the point of this? Like, I don't get that. And I should just note, like, I didn't hate watching Maxine. There is enough in this movie to like. It is a brisk pace. There are some great performances, good direction, aesthetic choices, all of that. But ultimately, the script is just so bad that I can't say that this made for a particularly memorable watching experience. And it doesn't make me want to revisit this trilogy anytime soon. And if I do end up rewatching Ty West X Pearl Maxine, I'll probably just end up rewatching X and Pearl and just skip Maxine in its entirety. This was such a weird, baffling film for me that I really just don't understand what the goal of this film was supposed to be. And by the end of it, I didn't think it was scary enough. I didn't think it got the thrills of the slasher right. There was nothing for me to grapple on. I didn't think the performances, especially of Mia Goth, were as strong as they had been in the past few ones. It ultimately was kind of a nothing burger for me, and that's how I'm giving this review, and that's why I'm giving Maxine 2 out of 5 stars. So thank you all for watching. If you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe for more reviews coming your way. Help me get to 1,000. It really helps me compete with some of the bigger YouTube channels that have much bigger following. Thank you all to have subscribed, and take care.